And I felt like in the fourth quarter, some of our stagnation was we just weren't all seeing the matchups the same and recognizing where the weak points in the defense might be. A lot of times against the Celtics, there's not a lot of great choices, but there are better choices. And like a possession that kind of highlights that was, Colin had an ISO against Tillman, and we end up running a screener up that's being guarded by Drew Holiday to set a screen, and we're basically just putting the best defender in the gym on Colin. In that moment, like that's where we all have to recognize the same thing, and probably Colin driving Tillman is our best opportunity in that moment. But proud of the team's fight. I thought that they played hard. Keontae's foul trouble obviously had us change up some of the rotation stuff, but overall, pretty pleased with the effort.
When it comes to the thinking as a group, do you feel like you guys are getting better at that?
Yeah, I do. Again, I thought we attacked the Celtics pretty well for a majority of the game. I felt like the fourth quarter, we just didn't have that recognition. I thought early in the quarter, they had Cornette and Tillman on the floor at the same time, and we had way too many possessions where the guys that were being guarded by them didn't bring them to screen. We didn't put them in actions early enough in the clock. But I think overall, we are improving at it. But this is what happens when there's change. I thought the team from the beginning of training camp up until the deadline had made a ton of progress, and I think you're inserting some new guys into new roles. Like we've got Bryce who's starting now, and Bryce has been working really hard all season, but he hasn't been with us a ton, and so the familiarity is not necessarily with how we want to play, but the familiarity with the people that he's on the court with. We just have different lineups that are going on. Potter's out there tonight. We're seeing a lot of new faces in different roles, and so the thinking as a group really gets tested in those moments, especially when you start getting fatigued and you're playing a really, really good team.
How did the veterans, JC and just some of the other veterans, how did they, do their part to try to get the younger guys up to speed? If there's a part for them to play in that sense.
Yeah, I think those guys have all done a really good job communicating in film sessions, communicating at practice, communicating in timeouts. I also think that a big part of this process is the veteran players giving the young players some grace. They were once the young players that were being thrust into opportunity early in their career, and I'm sure they had veteran players who did the same things for them. There's communication, there's mentoring, there's all those things, and then there's also times, especially in the game, where you have to give people grace because it's not going to be perfect. And I think that JC and John and Colin's been in the league 6 years now. Like I think those guys have all, Chris Dunn, I think they've all done a good job of having that balance of trying to help the young players, and then also taking their moments where we don't need to pile on the young players, especially in the middle of a game. Like it's really hard to take a ton of feedback and absorb a lot of things in the middle of the game.
In terms of those matchup kind of choices you talk about, how much of that is ball handler kind of waving off screen saying, hey, I got this guy, versus the screener not coming up, or like kind of where does that responsibility fall?
It's both. I think the first one's the ball handler, because they can obviously, usually when they're out on the perimeter, they can see the whole gym. Because sometimes when you're the screener, you run. Boston does a good job of pre-switching sometimes. The matchup's changing while you're running out there, and you have to recognize what's going on. But it's both. It's not one person's responsibility, especially when you're not marching it down the court and just running a pick and roll with one player. When the game's moving, everybody has to see it.
What do you think of the way that Micah Poter played tonight?
I'm really happy for Micah. We've talked about Johnny not getting an opportunity. Micah has done everything and more that we've asked him to for the last year and a half. He's a really good player. He's solid as a rock. And when he shoots, I think it's going in. Again, based on health and roster and all those things over the last year and a half, he has not gotten really any opportunity. And he's played well in the G League. He comes to practice with us and works as hard as anybody. I think you see his physicality. I think you see his understanding of what's going on. Like, he's really good at executing a game plan, and he can shoot. So really happy for Micah. You know, I thought he gave us 13 good minutes tonight.
Those 7 minutes that you guys went scoreless, I think.
It was fun. Yeah.
That was the best. What happened there?
Yeah, it was a lot of, I would say it's mostly kind of clunky offense where we're not seeing it the same, and then the spacing gets funky, and you're not getting shots kind of in the rhythm of the game. There's also probably we could pick out 4 or 5 possessions where we got a shot that our guys are plenty capable of making, and they didn't. So it's a combination of those things. You know, we try to take time out and sort some things out, and yeah, we really struggled in that pocket of the game.
How much do you feel that, like, in building? What?
What do you mean?
Like when it's been like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, is that like, do you feel that pressure almost? Like, oh man, it's been a minute.
Yes. Very much so. And I have 18,000 friends that remind me.
There was a point when you took Colin out just to talk to him before putting him back in. Can you tell us what that conversation was about?
Yeah, Colin had the ISO with Tillman,
Okay.
and then he brought Drew Holiday.
Okay.
And I just said, hey, for the rest of our lives together, anybody but Drew.
Yeah.
Thanks.